Hi everyone. Thanks for all joining me sort of late on Thursday. Appreciate it. Have you all had some lunch? Has everyone had some coffee? Are we on the sort of down low now? So I'm Gemma Cameron. I work at Coop Digital. I'm Ruby_Gem on the Twitters if you want to follow me. I work for Coop Digital in Manchester. I'm going to talk to you about visualisation. Now, before we get started, if at any point you decide that this talk is not for you, it is completely fine with me if you want to go up and go somewhere else. If it turns out this isn't the kind of visualisation that you're wanting to listen about, don't worry. So I put a tweet out yesterday to see what people thought of when you said the word visualisation. And this is the thing that kind of popped into my head. Is it clicking? It worked. It did. So this is the kind of thing that... Nothing's working. Nothing's working. Oh, wait. It might be me. It's technical difficulties. Don't worry, everyone. But even that's not working. Yeah. So this is what I think about. Does anyone remember this? So this is Real Player. This is music visualisation. I apologise for the short interlude. It was worth it because you get a dancing sheep. This is Annabelle the sheep. So some people think about visualisation as a sheep rocking out to music. This talk isn't about that. This talk isn't about D3, metrics visualisation, anything like that. So again, if this talk isn't for you, please feel free to leave. That's fine. So I'm going to tell you, this talk's going to be lots of stories. I'm going to tell you about my story, the time long ago when I worked at a startup. Then I'll talk a few more stories, and hopefully we'll get to something at the end. So a couple of years ago, I worked at a startup called Allegro Networks. They're a wholesale internet service provider. Does anybody know what this is? It's the internet. Maybe I got more of a reaction if I'd had that little box off of the IT crowd with the red button. Does anyone know what the internet is made up of? You have to really shout so I can hear you. That's right, interconnected networks. You have to say it in a really nerdy voice, and I've not quite nailed it. How are these interconnected networks connected? At networking events. This was a whole revelation to me. People decide to connect their networks at networking events. Apparently LinkedIn turn up with T-shirts with their AS number on the side. Your AS number is like your postcode on the internet. And when they decided to connect to this networking event, they go and... That wasn't me. They go around... They ring some providers, they haggle, get a good price, agree, and then the ticket goes on a backlog for an engineer to go into a data centre and plug in some wires and manually make that internet connection. 6 months is quite a long time, isn't it, in the world of the internet? So this chap here, Andy D, he had an idea. He'd been in this business for a very long time, and he had an idea of doing this in a completely different way. So there must be a better way. There must be a more 21st century kind of way to do this. And he approached me as a developer because he needed some developers to help him with this idea. Andy told me a story. So this was his dream. This was his vision. Imagine a couple of people at this networking event. They decided to connect their networks because that would help them make money. Connecting their networks would help them make money. They whip out their phones there and then, because it's always an app, press a button, and their networks are magically connected. Yeah, money, profit. So I joined Andy. I was all on my own. The other developers weren't joining yet. I'm kind of whizzing through this story a little bit. The other developers are going to be joining me in a few weeks, so I had time to sit down with the rest of the business. This was a very small startup. to do some analysis to try and figure out, because this is a completely new domain to me. I'd never worked as, in a wholesale internet provider space before. So this wasn't what you get at home. This is for companies. This is connecting data centers. This is a proper internet. So to do my analysis, I sat down and listened to all the people in the organisation to get their ideas. I tried to start figuring out what was going on, what they wanted. And it kind of looked a little bit like this. There were a lot of stakeholders. Allegro was born from the ashes of a failed wholesale ISP. The way that they tried to win was to be the cheapest. It didn't work for them. So at the meeting, we had a few people who were investors there. We had the CTO. We had the 3 network engineers. We had the salespeople. It's not me. Everybody had ideas. Everyone wanted you to hear them. So what did I do? I wrote all their ideas down. Every single person's idea, everything they came out with, all these people, like animals, I wrote all their ideas down. And then I put them on Post-it notes, because Agile. And what I found is that when people see you writing down their ideas, this is something I learned quite early on in my career. When people see you writing down their ideas, they let go. Does anyone know what these are? They're worry dolls. So in the 90s, when I used to go shopping as a teenager, we used to go into these like hippie shops, and they'd have these. These are worry dolls from Guatemala. So these little tribes that would basically dress up matchsticks, and you get a little bag, and you're supposed to tell these worry dolls your worries. Each one gets a worry. And you tell them that, you put them under your pillow, go to sleep, and when you wake up, your worry is gone. It's their problem now. And that's what I was doing by listening to people. They gave me all their ideas. They could let go. And when they give me all their ideas, I threw them away. The reason I did this is if we'd added every single thing that they'd asked for, every idea that they'd had, would have never delivered. Because I'd taken that from them, all of a sudden, we were able to move at speed. What I found is most important things will always come back. And it allows people the freedom and space to work on the most important thing right now. So I'm going to kind of go off on a bit of a tangent and talk to you about no backlog. Anyone heard of no backlog before? One person? Okay. 2? Hopefully it's going to be a bit of a revelation for you. So no backlog is basically what I was talking about. A previous company I'd worked at, they've had 6 months backlogs. I'd already come into this project deciding that I didn't want to have a backlog for the project. I'd seen it at businesses where they'd been completely stifled because they'd had this 6 months backlog. Who here visualises their backlog? Couple of people? Keep your hands up. Do you know how many stories or features or tasks you've got in that backlog? Keep your hand up. How many? 76? 76, yeah? Anybody else who had the hand up? No? So usually when I ask this, I hear things like 300. I don't know. 876. 76 is quite good because you can visualise that. Most people have their backlogs in Jira and an issue tracker because that's where they sort of squirrel them away. I just squirreled them away in a bin. It's not really much difference. A company I'd worked at had got a deal with Lonely Planet, and they were going to put these Lonely Planet guides on their hotel website. And they had a deal with Lonely Planet for a whole year. Because our backlog was that big, we were unable to implement that before the contract ran out. The world we live in, 6 months to a year is just too long. So I went in there thinking, no backlog. The other thing that we decided to do was no bugs. So, who's got a bug tracker? A few? Who knows how many bugs are in the bug tracker? How many? 12? 12 or something. So you've got 76 in your backlog and 12 bugs. It's pretty good. Well done. This didn't mean I had bug-free code, by the way. It just means that fixing bugs takes priority over new features. It means that you don't store them up, because project managers never give bugs priority over new features. You know, shiny new stuff that'll get us money, or bugs. Both of these things, there's a really good book called The Goal. If you've not read it, you should go and read it. And it describes these artifacts that you build up as waste, as decay. So if you think about your bugs and your backlog as like yogurt, especially your bugs. If somebody comes up with a bug today, and by the time it gets to you, in 2 weeks and 3 months, and how many changes you've made to that code base, is that bug still valid? Is that story that somebody came up with 3 months ago still valid? This also goes on to lead on to no estimates, and there's a great guy sat there in the middle called Woody, who you should all go and speak to if you want to know more about no estimates. Follow him there. Right. Being trolled by my own slides now. So what's this got to do with visualization? Right, where were we? Okay. There was just me, so I was all on my own. Remember that sad face? It's all on my own. There's just me, 3 network engineers, the CTO, and this guy called Neg, who's amazing, did loads of stuff. We had no BAs, had no product owner, nothing like that. Small startup, about 15 people. And I had to share all this information that I was starting to learn. Thought, I know, I'm going to be a good BA. I'm going to start writing everything down. I came up with a vision. Started writing down some scenarios. Not putting them in a backlog, no, just onto Confluence, onto a Wiki. I'd not worked on a greenfield project before, so what's the first thing you do? Go onto Google. Google told me to create a project board. It told me to come up with these things called user journeys. Has anyone seen these before? I hadn't. What's supposed to happen is it's supposed to show you the touch points for your user and how happy or sad they are, and you can show them before and after. I had more pages to Confluence. I sent them over to my pals who couldn't be bothered to read any of these streams and reams of text that I'd managed to put together. I couldn't be bothered writing it all. They couldn't be bothered reading it. I just went, stop. My hand hurts from writing all this stuff down, from gathering all this information. I was like, why am I doing this? What are you doing? It's because I'd gone to what I knew before. It's what I'd seen in other companies. It was something called cargo culture. Has anyone heard of cargo culture before? Okay, I'll tell you a little story. By the way, this is a tribe in Africa who worship Prince Philip. I couldn't find another picture for cargo culture, but I think it's quite fitting. So what happened in World War II is there was an island in the Pacific Ocean that the US Air Force were using as an airbase. And they came in. The indigenous people had never met any outsiders before. And the Air Force started giving to these indigenous people packages of food, some chocolate, canned goods. Indigenous people thought, this is great. Don't have to go hunting anymore. These sky gods come down and give us food. And then the war ended, and the Americans left. And these poor people wondered where their food supply had gone, wondered where the sky gods had gone. So they started to do the dance to beckon them down. They put coconut shells on their ears. They sat in a shed at the end. They lit torches down the runway. They did the dance with the sticks. But the sky gods never came. And it's a very sad story because a lot of these indigenous people died of starvation because they spent all their time mimicking the actions of the US Air Force to bring them food rather than hunting and getting their food. And that's cargo culture. That's going through ceremonies, that's going through the motions but not really understanding why. And that's what I was doing. And I've seen it in organisations before. Because Post-its, because Agile. Stand-ups, because Agile. Going through these ceremonies and not really understanding why. Just that equates this. So I went back to what felt right. Forget everything that I knew, everything I'd experienced before, my previous companies, previous businesses. Let's go back to scratch. So what felt right? And what felt right was the story that Andy had told me. What I was trying to do here, what I was trying to achieve was to get this information, this learning of this new domain across to my colleagues in the most concise way. Rather than using customer A and customer B, as Andy had started talking about, I started to try and relate to these customers. I started to give them names. I started to give them a bit of backlog. So rather than, two people meet and decide their networks should connect, it was an internet service provider, PlusNet. Meet with Netflix. So it'd be great if we got our networks to connect. And I had this idea in my head. I could see it in my head, this story. And I thought back to a lad that I knew at university, and when he left, he started to do blogs with sort of generated comic strips. It's like, that's what I can see. That's the story I can see. So I Googled, and I found this thing called bit strips. Anyone seen this? It's really cool. Really cool. Because you get these puppets, and you can completely manipulate the face and their facial interactions. Or, a little bit more exciting than that user journey one that was doing the smiling, happy face, sad face. You get a lot more nuances in there. And I started turning it into a comic. These were actually two people that I knew. Gaz was somebody I played roller derby with, who works at this internet service provider. And Rich was somebody I used to work with who works at Money Supermarket. So I started to bring these people to life, to really start to empathise with them, to know who they are. Each one of my comics always ends with this. There's a lady talking about it at Agile Manchester the other week, and she really liked that these comics, I do it as a workshop, but they always end in this, aha, yay moment. So that's the killer shot, so that's what you're after. Unfortunately, bit strips is gone now, so you cannot make these. However, you can go and have a look online. I think you can get some, Marvel ones. So imagine Iron Man going through your story. And I started to decorate our project board with comics and pictures. And it made it a lot more enticing than people going past and seeing words. We had some accountants come round, because in the UK, you get tax relief for doing research and development. And they came round and said, so what is it you're building? I gave them one of these comics. 5 seconds later, they just gave me back and said, can we just have a photocopy of that? I was like, yes. They get it. So that was my time. That was one of my stories I'm going to tell you. The next story was when I left Allegro. We did manage to deliver this, by the way. We weren't the first people in the world to think about automating network provisioning. All the bigger boys had tried to do it out there, but we were the first people to do it. We managed to do it in 3 months because of the tools and techniques that I described. So I left and I joined this company called Bright HR. When I joined Bright HR, I joined as an internal startup consultant. So I was supposed to be in there. I'll go in, ask everybody what's going on, all people at different levels. And I thought what I want to do is try and get the development team speaking to the rest of the business. Because this is a little garden in the middle of the office. And it would divide the IT team and the rest of the business. And I wanted to break that divide. So I started going around asking people, because there was a deadline to launch a product. Our big conference, as there always is. They had quite a lot of time. I think they had from January to October, so it wasn't unrealistic. Interviewed everyone, CEO, all the salespeople, everybody like that. Yeah, we're going to deliver. It's all going to be fine. Everything's going well. So, great. Started going to the stand-ups, and they had an interactive board. It was Jira, and it had 3 levels. And they were kind of focused every day on this sort of very detailed level. And nobody who went to these stand-ups knew what was going on. And as I started to dig a bit deeper, it kind of looked like this was a lucky dip of tasks that had been broken up. So they put a business analyst in charge of the project management. Project management, big picture. Business analyst, small details. And what he'd done is he'd broken up the project into pieces, into like pages or sections, split that up into little tasks and given that to the development team, and they were just lucky dipping. We weren't actually making any progress. I didn't really know how to explain this to people. I went and spoke to the UX team, and they'd done some screenshots, because design up front, because Agile. And I got all these screenshots of these pages, and I put them on a wall, right next to where everybody would go to go and get a cup of tea. And I ticked off the pages to show what progress we'd made. And in the 3 months they'd been working on this project, and they had another 3-4 months to go, all they'd managed to do was get to the login page. That was all they'd actually managed to do. Because they weren't focused on delivering a journey for a user, they were focused on all these tasks that had been split up. And as soon as the rest of the business saw this on the walls, they got scared. And they came to me and said, "Can you help us?" So I did. There's more to this story, which I'll touch on later. There was much more wrong with it than just not being able to see the progress that was being made. And then I joined a company called Co-op Digital. Well, Co-op in the UK, we've got a digital division. This is a really cool little project we're working on called Now Cook It. And it's an free online cookery school that anyone can go on to. I thoroughly recommend you go on to it, nowcookit.co.uk. And one of the things I did when we were working on Now Cook It was to draw our Kanban board in a slightly different way. So when we were talking about the tasks that were on there, rather than having them in progress, we wanted to see where they were and kind of what needed to be done next. And you could see things moving around. So it might be that we were working on something that was about the dashboard, or something needed a bit of design, and that design would then move to the front end, but it needed some back-end stuff for a story or whatever. But it just meant that there was a nice, quick snapshot that people could see where we were up to. And as I went around Co-op, I started to see a load of other stuff that people were doing to visualise stuff that I'd never seen before. So this is a team, I think it was yesterday, impact mapping. This is a really cool one from the funeral care team. It goes all the way along the board, all the way along the wall in the room, and it shows you the journey of the user and all the touch points and all the people that they will interact with when they have to book a funeral. Because that team are trying to remove some of the paper processes, some of the blockages. This is another cool one. Call this a church roof project. Has anyone seen these at local churches where they start to show you how much money they've raised? So another way of showing the progress that was being made on a project. Sprint cadence. Annette's done a really good job with a lot of these. And I'd never seen anything like this before. I thought, this is great. Another roadmap she'd done. And it got me thinking, why do we visualise stuff? And we visualise stuff to show process and progress. We have information radiators, mapping processes, trying to make it easier to visualise complicated things. And the reason I do it is because I really struggle to keep things in my head. It's something that I've learned as part of my software craftsmanship. It's like building a house of cards, like debugging. And if anyone comes and talks to me, that house of cards will just collapse. So I've purposely given myself a small stack. And if I get too much stuff in my head, people can see me having a visible Stack Overflow exception. I will literally just stand there and just go, I can't work anymore, I'm broken. And I bought myself a whiteboard at home, and this is something that actually happened to me the other day. This is a mind map, if anyone's used these or seen these before. But it's just me getting everything out of my head, like those worry dolls. Getting it out there, getting it on the paper, getting it on the wall. And it means I can let go. Because where I get stuck in a loop, I'd go, right, well, I need to do this talk, but I've also got to do this board for this, and I need to do this. And I'd start thinking about one bit, and it would just interrupt me. I need to go and work on this, and I get stuck. So having it down on there, I've got something tangible I can manipulate. I can start doing a deep dive on different bits. I can go, that's not as important as that. That's what I've got left to do, but in order to do that, I need to do this. So that's something that really helps me. So let's have a look at what I did with these user needs. So this is something that I usually run as a workshop because people really like the comics. Step 1. We look at story cards. Does anyone use story cards at work? One person. Okay. Does anybody know much about behaviour-driven development and stories, user stories? So there's a guy called Dan North in London who came up with these. And these are templates. So as a I want, so that. You've got gherkin syntax, which people use in a lot of behaviour-driven development tools, which is given, when, then. And if you go and speak to Liz Keogh, who came up with the first JBehave BDD tool, she'll go and tell you that that was a terrible idea. So well done. These templates that they're using, I think that what they're there for is a way to start conversations, because as developers, we're usually quite bad at talking to people. People didn't really know how to start that. Why are we doing this thing? And with cargo culture has gone on, these are the kind of things we've started to come out. People will get these. And they're really boring to look at, in comparison to the comics and stuff. But people don't really know what they mean. They're supposed to be a placeholder for a conversation. But what are these things? Well, they're stories. In my workshops, I get people to come up with their user story cards. No one knows what they're talking about. So then get them to write proper stories. I say, write them as if you're telling them to a 5-year-old. Give the characters some life. There's been some brilliant ones where we've had like lumberjacks that have had this whole backstory, and all of a sudden they've come to work one day and chopped off their arm, and they need insurance, and they tell you about how their tool, their product's going to save their world. It's a really nice way to bring these characters to life, to give you empathy, to really understand, to create your story. I was at work the other week, and I ended up pairing one of the guys who's working on funeral care, and he'd had a requirement to come in to save the mortuary that he'd selected in a drop-down. And he put a message out to the tech team to say, should this be stored as a cookie? You know, how do we store these sorts of things? Do we store them as cookies? Do we store them in session? Should we store it on the user object? And as I was chatting to him, I said, well, why do we need to save it? What's it for? So we went and had a conversation with the subject matter expert, and they explained that this is because people will move around to different mortuaries, and they need to change the selection. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's not going to be on the session or the cookie because you can't have it on the machine. It'll have to be on the user object. And then it turned out they also needed it to remember as they moved around the different screens. When they came back, they had to have that remembered. But we wouldn't have known to implement that without that story, without understanding why that requirement was there. And you don't get that from one of these cards. But it's really difficult to put all this stuff down. But you need this story. You need to come up with these characters. You need to give them something before you can go and build these comics. And I have people sketching them. We have people using online tools. There's loads of stuff. But it's really fun to just sketch them out first, to get them out of your head. And as time went on, I distilled. This is a gin still. I shared the story, and it became my own the more I shared it. I began to understand it better, and began to understand the reason we were using this stuff. I distilled the idea into more and more relatable stories, it helped me understand the domain. And I ended up with this. So this was the thing, for us as developers, we were trying to sell. This is the thing I could relate to. So has anyone experienced Git going down? GitHub? Yeah, a few? It's annoying, isn't it? And the reason is because they're having a DDoS attack. There's a fire behind the internet door. And what we were suggesting doing was giving you a private door. That was the connection that this company were trying to make. And that would solve a lot of our problems as developers. And going through that process when I've done these workshops, it shows me that it started to evolve how we visualise stuff. So let's have a look at delivery processes. How do we visualise that? So at the beginning of the world, we had the waterfall process. Everyone's familiar with this, yes? Get a load of requirements, spend ages making those requirements. You do the work, tick them off. Then it all goes to QA, gets verified. Some other things. 7 years later, delivers to the customer, profit. Yeah? Then the Agile manifesto, and Agile came along and really messed all this up. If you distill Agile right down, where it's got the benefit over Waterfall is that you're starting to get feedback from the user faster. This is where Scrum comes in. It's usually the first step. Scrum is kind of a way of visualising your waterfall process. But in order to get your feedback sooner, you're going to do that in 2-week sprints. Yeah? So you visualise the process on the board. It's very much push. It's about getting stuff to go through all these gates that you already had in your waterfall process. Then you've got Kanban. So Kanban starts to... The difference as well with Scrum and Kanban is the stand-ups. Stand-ups with Scrum, you usually talk about what people are working on. When it's Kanban, you start to talk about the tasks and what is stopping us. It's more of a pull. What is stopping us delivering this item? And as you find problems with your process here, you can start to end up, Kanban helps you get rid of those processes and those gates and limit your work in progress to be able to get to this. Are you working on it yet? Have you delivered it yet? Is it done? Are people using it? That's all people are bothered about. And it's where it's accessible for anybody who's interested in you delivering these things to see what is going on. The next step on this evolution in showing your working process and being able to find the problems with it is single piece flow. So extreme programming, if you're going to have a look around that, you can see single piece flow. It's kind of a highly functioning development delivery team. So as you remove your backlog, you can deliver the most important thing to the user right now. And if you deliver in small enough chunks, you make sure that everything that you do, you can stop and change direction to work on the next most important thing. That's being agile. That's being able to move quickly and change direction at will. At this point, you don't need any process because you've got no backlog. What you do here is you visualise what you need to deliver. Those conversations you have at your Kanban stand-up about what's stopping you delivering it, this is visualising it. This is showing you the rabbit holes that you can go down as you start to look at different tools and go, oh, this is giving me a problem. It's a way of sharing that information of what's going on to anybody who is interested in this project. And no talk of this kind of visualisation would be complete without this. Has anyone seen this thing of beauty? I'm not seeing many aghast faces, so you've seen it. Does everyone else think this is a thing of beauty? So this was going around the internet not too long ago. I don't think I can watch it anymore. It's making my eyes bleed. This is supposed to be the tube. This is Deloitte's way of visualising all the many agile processes that are out there. Let's get back to it. So how do we improve our processes? And the answer is retrospectives. Everyone does retros? The idea is that you improve. As Woody says, you turn up the good. you start to look and get rid of those clunky bits. And you can have the conversations during your retro about that, but if you've not visualised the clunky bits, if you can't see that, if you can't feel that pain, you can't get it out of your head and share it with other people, it's been quite difficult to reflect and look back at how to improve. As you talk about these things, you start to find the problems. It helps you refine and distill the ideas, helps you improve things. If anybody wants some other ways to do their retrospectives, if they're not finding their retrospectives are as useful as they used to be, go and check out the retrospective wiki. It's really cool, some good resources on there. And turn up the good. I'm stealing that from you, Woody. I love it. It's one of the biggest things I got out of mob programming. Every day, at the end of every single day, you do a quick 15-minute retro. How can you turn up the good? So going back to the Bright HR story, as I say, it wasn't just me putting a load of pictures on the wall that made us helps us deliver. We still found that the team couldn't get anything done. Even when we refined the process and we started concentrating on delivering what users wanted to do so we could start using it and testing it. And we looked, and the architecture was in a lovely UML document that nobody wanted to read. No one had seen. I didn't want to look at it. It made my eyes bleed. So we got everyone together, and we got all our ideas of what we knew about the architecture on a wall. And we were all jumping up and drawing things. And as we stood back and looked, we realised that was the problem. It was such a mess. This is why it taken one guy 2 weeks. 2 weeks of struggling to try and get a user saved in the system, logged in user, or registered user saved in the system, and he still couldn't do it. And without us doing that, visualising that architecture, you wouldn't have known. Because it was in someone's head, it was unknown. Or maybe it was on a UML diagram, still unknown. Other ways of visualising stuff, you've got information radiators. So if you think about how salespeople would talk about the success of your project back in the day, it'd be reams and reams of papers with numbers that nobody wanted to read. We started getting things like this. Has anyone read The Lean Startup? It's a really good book. I definitely recommend it. It's got lots of nice stories about how different companies have done this build, measure, learn. And there's a lot of stuff about metrics, about learning. This is one of the things that the Lean Startup calls vanity metrics. Does it really matter how many people are on your site? Is that really the thing you want to be measuring? Or is it Google rankings? So one of the projects we've got at Co-op Digital is we've been redoing the listing for funeral homes in a more mobile-friendly format, so they'll go up the Google rankings so that people can find them. So it's not just a matter of the numbers, it's also where are they on the rankings. That's their measure of success. When I was telling you about Now Cook It that I was working on, I made this. It's a product that Shopify made called Dashing, really beautiful, handsome dashboards. I think they've stopped that project now and you can get something called Smashing. But that's what I used to visualise our project. So I had the status on there. I don't know if you can see, but behind the total visitors and the current visitors is a little tiny graph. So you get an idea of if things have changed. A lot of those are vanity metrics, but we've got the important stuff on there, which is, were people cooking things? Were people completing the course? The reason it was a success, and people really like this, because it looks pretty. It looks inviting. People want to have see what's going on. One of the things that Facebook and Etsy do, apparently, this is a story I learned the other week, so might not be true, I'm hoping it is. But they work out their metrics for success before they build a story. So they A/B test the feature, so they build it, they deliver it, and they put it out to half the users that do A/B testing. And only when it will only go live to everybody if the A/B test has passed the metrics if it's succeeded in that. It's an automated process. So it'd be really nice if that's what Facebook and Etsy do, and they work out that stuff in advance. And it will help you change your development approach, knowing that information, having that bigger picture. A thing that Amazon do, and again, this is a story someone's told me, it might not be true. They've realised that with most products, they fail because once you've built it, the developers and everyone's built it, you then hand it over to the sales team in a proper silo. And has anyone ever noticed that sales teams make things up when you give them the project or the products? They start to invent things that it should have done. There's a local company in Manchester, a startup, that failed because of this. The sales team would go out, whilst the product was being built, they would go out to potential customers, and the potential customers would go, yeah, we like it, but if it does this, we'll buy it. So the sales team would come running back and go, right, you really need to build this thing now, and then Walmart will buy it, or wherever it was. And it started increasing that backlog, and it got in the way of delivering the actual real things that would have made this product useful, and it died. The startup failed. So what they do at Amazon, they realised that this was a silo, this was like throwing stuff over the wall. And what they did was they worked with the sales team at the beginning of the process, and they build the marketing site. They build the shiny, sell the product site before the product's built, so that everybody understands what the key things are, the USP. Why people would want to buy that product, what that yay moment is, what the important things are. And it really helps focus you. So, one of the things I promised with this talk is to look at, is there another way? So the stuff that you're doing on your project, the way you visualise stuff, is there another way for you guys to do it? Because all of you in here are different. I'm assuming you've all got different teams unless you're all here from the same company. And your project's different. You know, all the people in there, the project, and the product that you're working on. It's all completely different. So stop copying. Stop that cargo culting. Look at what you're doing. Stop. Throw everything away that you know. Get it out of your heads. Share it with other people. Get it out of their heads. How do they see the world? And if you need some inspiration for ways to visualise stuff, I went a little hunt around, and I kept every time I've done this talk, I keep finding more things to add in and going, I'm going to have this in. I found this round work. You have to sell 575 co-op sandwiches to use an external meeting room. That was quite a lot of sandwiches. So I had to put the money into real values. I run a lot of tech event stuff over in the northwest of England, and one of them's Hack Manchester. And I went to a hackathon with the guy that I run this with, and he made a hack at Leeds Hack called Sausage Fest. And what it was about was taking data and putting the value of real-world objects into sausages. But not just any sausages. There was premium sausages, like Tesco Finest, or was it Richmond Middle Range, or was it a Sainsbury's or Asda Basics sausage that's, pretty much just eyelashes. Quite a different way of looking at the world. The Aston Martin you want? Lots of sausages. Jake, one of my colleagues, Co-op as well, they have quite a few different environments, and they didn't know what version they'd release onto each machine. It's kind of in someone's head. So he made this way of sharing that. So everybody knew what was going on. It's about getting stuff out of people's heads. People like graphs as well. See, I've not snored. I was quite impressed with that. This was a workshop that we did. That's the president of Co-op membership. We did a workshop at this really cool, fancy new place in town. And there was these artists there. So if anyone's seen these at conferences before, when artists start drawing what people are talking about, it's really creepy because they'd come up as you were having a conversation in a little group, and they'd earwig. And then they'd run off and put it onto this big wall. But it looked awesome. And it was a much better way of documenting what happened during that workshop, rather than reams and reams of text and minutes and agenda. Co-op membership as well, this 5+1, we've realised it was confusing people. So to put it into real value, if you go and spend 20 quid at the shop, you get a quid back for you. 20p will go to a charity. And what's that pound equal? 2 bars of chocolates. When I was on the plane coming here, I saw this map of the world, and I'd never seen the world like this before. I didn't realise that those bits at the top were touching each other. It's like, is that America and China? Is it Russia? I don't know. I'd never seen it, because usually it's one big, like, flat one, or you just see it from England and it kind of stops either side, doesn't it? You don't really see that. So I just found it really interesting to see things from a different point of view and get some revelations from it. If you go onto our blog, you can see some of the other ways that we've been visualising stuff around Co-op Digital. But what I'd like you guys to do is to go back to your teams and find your own way. Visualisation is a really powerful thing. It can give you the opportunity to highlight problems with your metrics, with your process, with the way that you're explaining things to other people. How do you see things? How do they see things? Get everybody together, get stuff out the head, and find your own way of visualising your project. Thank you. Has anyone got any questions? You can come and chat to me at the end if you do, or you can send me a tweet. Thank you.